It's a good day for a good day. Hello, everybody. My name's Cece Ray. Thanks for joining me here at Break the Dish, where we break the news and dish out the tea. We are recapping The Real Housewives of Atlanta, Season 17, Episode 9. These ladies are bringing it. I have to tell you, I really, really like this cast. I mean, I so like it. It's about time, too, don't you think? But before we get into it, you know what to do. Make sure you like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, because here we break the dish. We're recapping The Real Housewives of Atlanta, Season 17, Episode 9. I love it. We are picking right up where we left off. Remember, Kelli was like, saying how Porsha's like been with every Nigerian in Atlanta. That grabbed Porsha to turn around and be like, you slept with a married man. And next minute, Kelli's got a glass in her face, and then they're separated, and this is where we are picking it up. So Kelli's like, I'm going to smack a bitch in here. I mean, she is like, hello, this is your fault. You shouldn't have opened your mouth, Kelli. And Porsha's like screaming, she says, everyone knows that you were with a married man. You were lying on my ass last year, so I licked it back, and now you mad about it. Go ahead, tell her, Porsha. Angela said, every Nigerian in America? She got that from somewhere. I have to tell you, watch Angela very closely. I'm serious. She holds she's like the new bone collector. She holds the bones, and she figures out the puzzle pieces, to put the skeleton together, and then she whams you. Smart. So anyway, in Porsha's confessional, she thought, I thought Kelli was a boss girl, but you know what? She's just a follower. Why do you have, beef for me just for K. Michelle? It's true. So Phaedra, I love Phaedra. I've always loved Phaedra. Her confessionals this year are priceless. So in this confessional, she says the devil has entered the details, and I do mean Satan. Honey, I got two groups of women who can't be in the same room. She says, from meditation to mayhem. I love me some Porsha. Not great. So Kelli and Shamia, they were out of there. Kelli did all the nonsense and then was like, uh-oh, gotta go home, And Angie, Porsha, and Drew, they're sitting at the table because they're like, okay, let's eat, And Porsha says, look, I have tried to support Kay and get to know her, and she has it out for me. And in Angela's confessional, she says, K. Michelle said she had a tough time with female friends. And so I've made it my business to try and show her. And then you recap and you see K. Michelle and Angela chatting. And Angela says to her, I'm sorry you were introduced to this group with all this BS. And K. Michelle was like, yeah, it hurt my feelings. And Angela says, you got this. And Angela then says in her confessional, I don't want anyone to go through what I went through last year. And I bet it was hard for her to hear Drew say that she didn't belong. So now we see K. Michelle and Pinky and Phaedra, because Phaedra's obviously talking to them now, right? And K. Michelle says, look, I tried to talk, and then Drew began napping like a gnat. Phaedra says, would you like to return to the table? K. Michelle's like, I'm out. Phaedra says, look, I don't want to be in this space. And Pinky says, Drew is inserted herself when she, Kay was trying to explain things. This is what happened. And in Pinky's confessional, she was like, you go on, Phaedra. In the middle of all this chaos, you give me a bath, I get a plate of food. She's like, you're all right with me. So we're back at the table, and Porsha says, look, I like K. Michelle. Like, I think she has a good heart, but for whatever reason, like, she needs to fight with me, and I don't know why. And while Pinky and Kay are in the car, Pinky says, look, I'll be honest. I genuinely think that she wants to be your friend. And I know that sounds crazy, but there's a facade that she has to, keep up. And Kay says, look, when we're not around people, like, she's a different Porsha. Pinky says it's almost like she turns into somebody else. So we're back at the table, and Porsha says, like, to me, I was excited to build a real friendship with her. She doesn't understand some simple things, and so we had a couple hiccups. But besides that, I thought it was cool. And Angela says, if her feelings were hurt, we should have heard her out, which we tried to do. And then she kind of looks at Drew, and she's like, but it got a little derailed with you. And Drew says, because she said something to me, you're not going to address me like I'm not sitting at the table. Drew. I'm wondering. So, and Angela says, that in her confessional, she says, this group is fractured. Bad. She sees both sides, but she just wants to side on the side that's right. And that is what friendship is about, too, is to be able to say, you're wrong, apologize for it, and then make amends and move forward. Phaedra says, the car, she comes to the table now, and she says, like, the car was there. We talked, K. Michelle apologized. And she said, Phaedra, I was not trying to get rowdy. I just don't know, how it got to that point. Hello? Like, we all know how it got to that point. And her name's Kelli. Like, seriously. Drew didn't help matter that any, but I'm just saying, definitely Kelli. But, Porsha says, every time, Kelli was butting in, K. Michelle be like, what she's trying to say here is that, like, Kelli said at the table, like, well, you don't have to worry about it. And K. Michelle, like, echoed her. That's right, you don't have to worry about it. And then Porsha felt like, oh, okay, is this a double? And Porsha says, if you want to be mature, why haven't you said that to me? You have not called me. This is not the place for you to have done that. She says, stop you when, she says, I'm going to stop her when, she starts talking about that Porsha set her up, is basically what she's saying. And back in the car with K. Michelle and Pinky, Kay says, look, I tried to talk to you like a woman. I'm not wrong in that. And you're not going to make me crazy. You're not going to make me aggressive or anything. You don't run me, and you don't run Atlanta. K. Michelle kind of does have it out for Porsha, but I think it is the wrong energy to the wrong person. I'm just saying. Then we're at Shamia's parents' house. I find this next segment kind of interesting. So Shamia goes into her mom's house and she's talking about Phaedra's event. She says, you know, we were meditating on the floats and all of a sudden I hear and they're like the air was coming out. I don't know if they did it on purpose or not. She said, like, now the group is completely divided. And she says, they're trying to say it's me. Like, I don't have anything. I don't have any drama. And I'm definitely not trying, with anybody. And she says, and you're telling K. Michelle something when she's not liking. Well, that's what she was trying to say. Angela was saying that K. Michelle, I couldn't read my notes. K. Michelle said that, Angela said that K. Michelle said that Angela's saying something along the lines of like, Shami is telling her things to not like us, you know. And in her confessional, she says, I wish I knew why, I'm always getting the blame for the division. I have no clue. Now, the next part, she talks about her surrogacy. Before we get into that, there is a reason why she came in here for this shoot and purposely talked about this event and how they're blaming her, for the division. She has no idea why. Because remember, Angela was saying, you're the one that told K. Michelle about the plotting and the planning and all this. And even though K. Michelle said, nope, she didn't tell me, Angela doesn't believe it. Now, I think there's a reason why Angela doesn't believe it. Remember this. We'll get into it in a minute. So then her mama says, at the end of the day, they're just trying to play you negative and, think you cause things and let them think those crazy thoughts, let them take it and run with it. So, in her confessional, she says, it's not feeling like a sisterhood, not a family, not even friendship. She's like, I don't like it. There is a point why she keeps pushing this. Like, I didn't do anything. I didn't do anything. I mean, where there's smoke, number one, there's fire. Number two, when you're pushing this much narrative, doth protest too much? I'm just saying. But anyway, the family starts asking about the surrogacy. And she says, yeah, it's going. Yeah, She says, I'm trying to get excited. It's failed so many transfers. It's draining. It's emotionally draining. But, I want to be excited. But then, nothing happens. And then right now she has one good male embryo and one good female embryo. And the male, it looks like it's really strong. But she says, the others were strong too. And they failed like 5 times. It's really sad. That is a storyline, by the way, that they should run with. It's really sad. And so Shamia says, if I do this again, am I going to get a healthy kid? And in her confessional, she said, look, when they got married, they agreed to a large family, 2 boys and 2 girls. And that it's easy. The first, it was easy having Shia. But they didn't think that they would have the issues that they do with Shiloh. And Shiloh's pre-existing conditions, she's fearful of growing her family. And she goes, I just want to give him a son. And her mother says, look, if it's God's will, he'll get it. And Shamia says, all those things I think about, I don't know if she's going to live a normal life. She might be my baby for life. That's really hard when it's such a journey. It really is a journey. And when it doesn't take, you're all excited about becoming a mom. And when it doesn't take, then all of a sudden, it's just so disappointing and so devastating. And then when you have a child that possibly might have special needs and you're trying to have another one, now you're thinking, oh God, what if the same thing happens? Like, can I handle having two children that might that might have special needs? That I feel sorry for Shamia for. Like, it's a hard situation to be in. And I thought, I could be wrong about this, but I thought this one does not take. I could be wrong, but I thought that's what I heard. Um, so it really is difficult. Now we see, Porsha and Dennis taking Pilar to school. Angela is in her new house, she bought that she's going to flip. This thing is infested with spiders. Like, this woman is in there, like, trying to smack them all with her shoe. Get a bug guy in there, lady. Like, if you could afford to buy the house, you could at least afford for a bug guy. There is no way that I would be in that house. I'm just saying. We see then Kelli visiting Phaedra. And Kelli says, well, first Phaedra is teasing her because she's like, oh, do you have a bra on today? And Kelly's like, oh, I don't do that, And Kelli says, look, I truly apologize for my behavior at the event. I never wanted to come to your home and disrupt anything. And Phaedra says, I know that things can get tough, but don't you see that this group is fragmented? Kelli says, look, when it comes to Porsha, I definitely can take ownership for some of the things that I've said about her. She says, but at the same time, I had enough of her putting her finger in my face. Some person who had a married man in their divorce documents. Okay, first off, you started it by the statement of the Nigerian men comment. You knew she was going to clap back. But Phaedra said, well, I don't know what's in those documents. And Kelli says, oh, I've seen it online. Really? Like, I see a lot online. Doesn't mean it's true. In Kelli's confessional, she says, look, I'm not interested in being friends with Porsha. I'm friends 365, not 265. Now, what she's talking about is when they recap back, they show you. Remember when Porsha, this was, in the beginning of of Real Housewives of Atlanta. And Porsha says, 265 days a year, that's the joke that Kelli's kind of landing flat on. So I thought I'd have to explain it to you. Phaedra says, look, I might need to bring my flute out again. Like, I wanted us to get healing. And Kelli says, look, I had such a heavy week. Phaedra says, what's going on with you? Kelli says, I've gone through a divorce and now I can't film with my daughters. And Phaedra says, well, I might have some advice about filming. She goes, but even when they get married, and Kelli says, they still want the control. And that's what scares me. And Phaedra says, you got to get married. Like, I haven't tried that yet because I don't really want to get married. She says, but you got a man, right? I heard you do a special shout out to somebody. And what Phaedra's talking about is at the opening of the restaurant, she did do a shout out to Jarvis. And she says, yeah, he's a good prospect. His name is Jarvis. And she starts giggling and whatever. And Phaedra's like, do we get to meet him? She's like, absolutely not. And then in Phaedra's confessional, she says, look, I understand. Until that relationship is rock solid, I'd keep it to myself. So Kelli says, I've apologized and you haven't said you accepted my apology. Phaedra says, oh, of course, I accept, I just want to make sure you're good. Divorce brings the worst out in everybody. And Kelli says, the person you marry is not the same person you divorce. And Phaedra says, well, it doesn't get better. It continues to be crazy. Now we're with Pinky, and her daughter is doing a photo shoot for Milano de Rouge, which is a brand out of Philadelphia. And she starts talking about how when she was young, she would sit there and watch her mom perform with this reggae band, and she was just, enamored about how many people loved her mother. And so she's doing the same thing with her daughter, Dee Dee. And then Angela comes in with her daughter. Her daughter had just walked the runway for Fashion Week. And in Angela's confessional, she says, Pinky and I got off on a bad start in Dallas. We really don't know each other as well as I'd like. So I want to start again, build a new friendship. Now Cynthia enters. Cynthia's like giving Dee Dee like pointers and everything like that. So finally, when it's over, it's Pinky, Cynthia, and Angela, and they sit down, and Cynthia says, I feel like I missed a lot at Porsha's. At Phaedra's. And Pinky says, oh, it was bad. Angela says, there were already issues when we got there. She said, Kay had an issue with Porsha and Drew. Cynthia goes, what I see is Porsha making an effort to be friends with Kay Michelle. So what am I missing? Pinky said, well, first, when she brought Kay Michelle to the group, she was, confronting Kelli about being with a married man. Then she said, she asked if, Kay Michelle had a miscarriage. And so she feels like Porsha gives mean girl energy. Cynthia's like, no, 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 no. Angela says, well, I went to dinner with her. And what she explained is that, they shared like ex-boyfriends of sort. Cynthia's like, what damn ex-boyfriend? And, then for some reason, Pinky says, there was a lot of fingers. Kelli took up a glass. And in Cynthia's confessional, she says, this was a calling from God. I came early. I was removed from that space. And when shit hits the fan, God says, not today, Satan. Not these cheekbones. I love me some Cynthia, too, I have to tell you. So Cynthia says, look, I'm holding the two of you accountable. She says, you're going to have to be the wranglers. And at the end of the day, you don't bother anyone. No one's coming for you. And Angela says, well, me and Shamia got to work things out. She had some energy for me in Dallas. And more things, bringing up older issues and highlighting, stuff like that. And Pinky says to Angela, look, you're my friend now, but you instigate sometimes. Like, I don't think you do it on purpose, but you genuinely do. So Cynthia says, well, we're not going to do this, basically. She's like, because Pinky, you're not too far off. But Pinky says, I think you should have a combo one-on-one, face-to-face with Shamia. And Cynthia says, Shamia will receive a conversation. And Angela replies, I've already had multiple conversations with Shamia. And Cynthia says to Pinky, see if you can convince Kay Michelle to have some sort of like reset with Porsha. They don't have to be like BFFs. And Pinky said, what I would like is to tell Porsha she's starting to talk. And Cynthia said, how was it just with you and Porsha? And Pinky said it was good. You know, look, in a perfect world, we could all come together. That would be cool. So Kelli's at the dentist. Shamia visits. Apparently, Jarvis is giving her a new smile. He has flowers delivered for her. And in her Kelli's confessional, she says, after this horrible divorce, I finally meet someone who loves my children, and I am so grateful. Now, Jarvis is not his name; it's his alias, and we're not gonna know who Jarvis is, because there are a few people around here that like to sleep with other people's husbands. She's so nasty. Oh, we see Drew with her team meeting. Listen, I never really liked Drew, to be quite honest. Something. She's trying to explain that this new manager is going to give her a bigger role. She's going to take her career to the next level. And, she says to her team, I don't know what the issues are going on here. When I leave, that's when I hear about it. I have to work with people I don't like. And then all of them start arguing. And Drew just is looking at her manager can you deal with this? And finally, the manager does step up and says, look, there's a lot of pettiness here and it has to stop. Okay. I don't think we needed that segment, but okay, moving on. We see Pinky, K. Michelle, Cynthia, and Porsha. They're all sitting down at a table. K. Michelle says to Porsha, how you doing, Porsha? Porsha says, I'm good. You're looking beautiful, K. Michelle. K. Michelle says, thank you. They're trying to be cordial with each other. And in Kay's confessional, she says, look, Porsha's not a bad person. She's just not smart, but she's huge, so she could kick my ass. So I'm going to be cordial. And Pinky says, now this table setting is unusual, but clearly we have a division in the group because, Pinky's sitting next to K. Michelle and Cynthia is sitting next to Porsha. And Pinky says, we want to bring everyone together. Cynthia says, look, I see you guys as being great friends, but I respect everyone's feelings. I respect timing and I respect God. So I'm just here to support. So Porsha says, Pinky says, listen, we don't even need to be here for this combo. These two are the ones that need to talk, So Cynthia's like, we're going to go over to the bar. Let us know when you want us to come back. So, this was funny. Before they leave, Pinky says, oh, I think I'm losing my voice. And Porsha says, oh, good. And then in Porsha's confessional, she said, Pinky came over the other day. She said, and she talks so much, I couldn't even get a word in edgewise. I mean, I had to agree to this meeting just to get her to shut up. It was kind of funny. So Porsha starts the conversation. She says, what's going on with us? K. Michelle says, I feel like we was talking and I wanted to hear you and listen to you, but I don't feel like you listened to me. Porsha says, I was already closed off to the conversation because so many people have brought it to me. And she says, that conversation should have been between you and me. And Kay says, I can say that was wrong of me. I take that one. So Porsha says, when you revealed at the table you've been set up and that I was going to expose you if you would have said that to me, we could have talked about it. You know, it didn't happen over a period of time. So then finally I got into a place of like, I'm giving her so much. I'm trying to be her friend. And I see you're not reciprocating. K. Michelle says, understand that my first day, and of course they recap again where Porsha's like to Kelli, you slept with a married man type thing. And K. Michelle says, listen, I believe in tit for tat. And Porsha says, you're going to see way more than that, but you're going to find your way in this group. I'd just be careful what you're being told. So Porsha says in her confessional, Kay is basing our friendship experience off of Kelli. Like, you don't even know what happened, And she says, Kelli's made accusations about me first. So I was just getting my lick back. And then she said, Kelli with her hands. And, well, no, she actually said Kelli on her knees and hands. Praying to this pastor who's a married pastor has nothing to do with K. Michelle. K. Michelle says, I understand your point of view, but understand what I'm saying as well. Porsha says, look, no. I have no ill will for you in this group. Kay says, I have no hate on this side. Like, I want nothing good for you, but good for you. And Porsha says, I feel that, And in Porsha's confessional, she says, I like K. Michelle. She's apologizing. I receive it. And this is the second time. She said, but I don't know about the third time. I don't know what that's going to bring her. It could bring her a closed door. I think that might be coming. Cynthia and Pinky return and, meanwhile, K. Michelle says, look, we got a problem. Within 48 hours, we got to holler at each other, And Porsha says, okay, 48 hours. And she looks up at Cynthia and she goes, isn't our friendship contract? And Cynthia's like, oh no, not a friendship contract. And then they recap back to remember when Cynthia gave Nene a friendship contract? It was kind of funny, So Cynthia says, did we get to the bottom of all the scheming and plotting? Porsha says, no, we didn't. She turns around and looks at K. Michelle and she says, you need to let that go, Kay. Like, do you really think, come on. And she goes, and Drew hasn't even been here. K. Michelle says, why are you doing that? Like, people feel like people are picking on Drew. Like, she puts herself in these situations. There was an effort to find info about me and to expose me. And there were 3 parties that were part of it. Phaedra, Porsha, and Drew. And Drew's lying about what she got going on. And in K. Michelle's confessional, she says, when it comes to Drew, the plot and plan, that was real. Like, you act like I know your side, dude. That was number 1. Number 2, to talk about a rumor that was from a disgruntled ex of 8 years ago. Remember, like, that rumor? I don't want to get into it, but it was something about, her coochie coo. That's all I'm going to say. And she said, and the 3rd was about my toes. They said my toes were long, and they are long. What? What are you talking about, K. Michelle? So this whole plotting and planning against you, that's all it was? Like, you think it was because of Black? Because of a disgruntled ex? And your toes? Your long toes? Okay. So Porsha says that she asked everybody in the circle, and everybody said that she had not said that to her, that you knew Black, except for Shamia. Shamia was the only one that was like, well. And she said Shamia is the only one who said that Drew did. She was connecting you with Black. Everybody else said no. And in Porsha's confessional, she says, look, Drew likes to get tea on people. She's had a long history of doing that to someone she doesn't like. She's like, but is she doing that to K. Michelle? I just don't see the motive. So Porsha says, I've not done anything to look up any info about you. K. Michelle says, you haven't done anything to me? Porsha's like, I sure wish whoever told you would make their self known. And in K. Michelle's confessional, she's talking to production. And she says, all of you know exactly what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. She says, but I'm going to hold the feet to the fire of the person who created it. And that is Drew. She says, I'm not in a hateful place when it comes to her. Like, why, do you need saying like this? Like, what are you looking for? She says, but I wanted to have this conversation with Porsha. K. Michelle. So now Angela and Shamia are meeting up. Shamia's like, what made you set this up? And Angela says, well, I want to get to the bottom of the tension between us. At the Phaedra's event, it was so thick, you could cut it. And Shamia says, that's unfortunate, Angela, because I feel like just when I'm getting to know you, it's like hot cold. She says, in Dallas, you were the only one saying I was stirring things up with the group. And even though K. Michelle said that it wasn't me, you still were like you. It feels like you're picking. Angela goes, now why do you always have to think you're the victim? Nobody's picking on you. And Shamia says, your discernment was off. Angela says, I still believe it. Shamia goes, use your discernment to help sell a house. And then she turns around and says, use your discernment to tell about the drama that you've had with other people in this group. Use your discernment was very off with me. Angela's like, first of all, you're not that high on the Richter scale for me to be bothered by you. Shamia says, then stop being bothered. Angela's like, I'm not. You know what? Continue to talk about me. And I respond. Shamia's like, to who? Angela says, you said I broke up your friendship. Shamia's like, we're not bringing up anything about Porsha. I'm here to talk about me and you. Why do you keep saying I'm stirring things up with K. Michelle? Angela said, did you tell K. Michelle how we intentionally fell out? And of course, they recap back to last year's reunion, where basically Shamia blamed Angela for the demise of her and Porsha's relationship. And, Angela, in her confessional, says every time she's confronted with how she made someone feel, she evades accountability. So Shamia's confessional, she says, I think it's weird, like she's able to forgive someone that said they were sleeping with her husband. I just laughed about it and I apologized for it. And then she's able to forgive, the whole Phaedra fiasco. That was false. She's like, but she's still mad at me. Shamia says to her, I'm about to think you're a little touched. Angela goes, whose mind are you using? You conjuring up Porsches? You conjuring up Candies? Shamia's like, you don't even know Candy. Angela goes, I don't have to. You're trying to be like Candy. How did Candy get into this? How did Candy get into this? Poor Candy. She's not even on the show anymore, and her name is still coming out of people's mouths. So Angela says, you don't have your own identity, baby. You're just a lapdog. Shamia responds with, Drew told you to say that too. Angela's like, I see you, lapdog in lipstick. I'm self-made. Never had to lay on my back to get my, fuel. Shamia's like, your husband leaves in the morning and doesn't even come back. Angela says, I see why you leave home and you don't come back. What is going on here? I didn't expect it to go this left, to be honest. And Shamia responds, why don't you work on your house? Angela says, he sees your ass in the... She goes, he sees your ass in the streets, and Shamia says, try to keep him at home. How about that? Angela says, Shamia, let's talk about the Falcons or the Hawks. Shamia said, I was a great host. Angela was like, why were you sticking around then? Shamia goes, because it pays well. Angela says, but why were you sticking around? Shamia says, you probably should get one of those jobs. I heard real estate isn't really working out for you. Angela says, look, I've had multiple businesses. Men pay well. Shamia goes, somebody is not going to have a conversation here anymore with Sasquatch. Angela says, that's right, it's enough to walk all over your ass. And Shamia's getting up to leave, and she says she can't even get her own shit straight. Like, I'm outside, her husband sees me out, and if your husband's seeing me out, he's out. Angela says, what are you running for? Like, you want to call me Sasquatch? Well, you sleep with Sasquatch every night. And then Shamia says, work on your marriage, Angela. Now, that small little thing they were confessionals. What I loved about it too is that they did the confessionals like they did in the old days of Atlanta, where like right away when the scene was done, they're like standing on the street giving a confessional. That's exactly how this was. I really like that, to be quite honest, because you're really getting their thoughts right then and there, not like 3 months later when, they're shooting their confessionals. You know what I'm saying? But that is how the episode ended. What did you guys think? Did you like it? Okay, if you were going to rate it, what would you rate it? I think I would rate this one a solid 8. It was good. I thought it was great, but it's definitely a solid 8. You know what I mean? I have a couple thoughts about this episode too. Let me tell you. K. Michelle. All the plotting. She thinks people, that people are plotting and planning against her. And then she comes out with, it's about her long toes. Are you kidding me? Like, you're stirring up all this crap about your long toes? Really, K. Michelle? Okay. All right. Oh, boy. However, Angela's really coming for Shamia. She is insistent that she's stirring the pot. Matter of fact, she did a tweet saying, listen, you're two-faced, but you're showing it. Like, you better come with that energy on the reunion. And why is she going at Shamia so hard? Now, I get that Shamia kind of blamed her for the demise of her and Porsha, but I don't think that's why Angela's coming for her. Now, we find out that her husband was at this party or event or whatever that she was hosting. This was for the Hawks and the Falcons. And did you hear under her breath what she said, actually? She said something along the lines of like like Shamia's with somebody on the Hawks. She's just throwing shade. I don't know if that's true or not. But I think Angela's coming for Shamia maybe for another reason. Want to know what my reason is? I'll tell you the reason. I find it interesting that K. Michelle is talking about all this plotting and planning against her. However, allegedly, her, K. Michelle, Shamia, and Nosh met before filming. Now, I can understand K. Michelle and Shamia meeting up before filming, get to know each other. But why was Nosh there? I mean, wouldn't it have been like natural to have her husband there? Why was Nosh there? Now, Nosh is coming out saying, I didn't want any part of RHOA, and K. Michelle now has brought me into the picture. Nosh is the guy that apparently K. Michelle dated and then just stayed friends with, and then apparently Porsha dated and stayed friends with. Well, I don't even know. I don't even think they stayed friends. But why was Shamia, K. Michelle, and Nosh? Remember, she was talking to him when all of a sudden she came out with, somebody's plotting and planning against me. Now, this is allegedly, but I find it kind of interesting, don't you? Think about it. I'd love to see your comments down below. Don't forget, too, that tomorrow I'm going to be, hopefully, if the weather goes well, I'll be live at a watch party for Summer House. And do not pass me up. I'm going to be live on TikTok at 1 p.m. on Wednesday. All you got to do is go to Breaking the Dish on TikTok, and I will be live at 1 p.m. talking all about Summer House. I'm sure we're going to have a lot to get into. But Breakers, you know what to do. Make sure you like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell as well right here on YouTube, because here we break the dish.